The dawn of February 23, 2026, arrived not with the gentle songs of birds, but with the low moan of the wind. It was a sound the Gurung people of this cliffside village knew well. It spoke of the monsoon's shifting moods, a powerful breath from the high Himalayas that could change their world in an instant. The stone houses clinging to the mountain like barnacles felt the pressure. Inside, families stirred from their sleep, not from the light, but from the unsettling vibration that traveled through the very rock beneath them. The wind was a reminder of their precarious existence, a life lived on the edge, balanced between the sky and the deep green valleys below. This was no ordinary wind. It carried the damp smell of distant rain and the chill of high altitudes. It pushed against the sturdy wooden shutters and found its way through tiny cracks in the walls, making the butter lamps flicker. An elder, his face a map of many seasons, stepped outside, his bare feet firm on the cold stone patio. He looked up at the clouds, heavy and grey, racing across the sky. There was an urgency in their movement, a warning that the day would not be easy. The village was a living thing, and it seemed to hold its breath, listening to the mountain's deep and troubled voice carried on the wind. The rhythm of village life, usually so predictable, felt strained. The familiar clatter of pots and the soft calls to livestock were muted, swallowed by the wind's persistent howl. Every person felt it, a tension in the air that went beyond the weather. The annual honey hunt was approaching, a sacred and dangerous task that required perfect conditions and the community's full strength. This powerful wind was a bad omen, a challenge from nature that had to be met. The mountain was testing them, and they knew they had to prove they were worthy of its bounty, especially the mad honey from the cliffs. Every gust that swept through the narrow pathways seemed to carry a message. It rattled the bamboo ladders leaning against the houses and made the prayer flags snap with loud, sharp reports. The sound was like a constant, urgent conversation between the sky and the village. Children, usually playing freely on the terraced fields, were kept close, their eyes wide as they watched the world outside their homes bend under the wind's force. The day had just begun, but already the entire community was on high alert. They were a people connected to the earth, and the earth was telling them to be ready for a fight. A young man named Kale, his shoulders strong from years of carrying heavy loads, made his way towards the stream that was the village's lifeline. He carried 2 large brass jugs, their surfaces gleaming even in the dim morning light. His task was simple, one performed every day: to fetch the first water for his family's morning tea and meal preparation. But as he approached the place where the water usually tumbled over the rocks, he heard nothing. The familiar, cheerful sound of splashing water was gone. Instead, there was an unnerving silence, broken only by the relentless howl of the wind. He quickened his pace, his sandals slapping against the damp stone path. Where the stream should have been, there was only a trickle of muddy water seeping through a massive pile of earth and rock. A large section of the bank upstream had collapsed overnight, creating a crude, unstable dam. The water, the lifeblood of the community, was blocked. This was more than an inconvenience. It was a crisis. The village's small herd of goats and yaks depended on this stream, and the terraced fields of barley and millet below would soon wither without its life-giving flow. Kyle dropped his jugs and scrambled up the slippery bank to get a better view. The collapse was fresh. Loose soil and uprooted shrubs showed where the earth had given way, likely weakened by unseen rains higher up the mountain and pushed over the edge by the powerful winds. The water was pooling behind the blockage, building pressure. He knew that if the natural dam broke suddenly, a flash flood could surge down the mountainside, threatening the lower paths and even the houses closest to the ravine. The silence of the stream was a deceptive calm before a potential disaster. Without another thought, he turned and ran back towards the cluster of houses, his feet sure on the uneven ground. He didn't need to shout. The sight of him running, empty-handed and with a look of alarm on his face, was enough. A few sharp calls, short and functional, cut through the wind. "Pani Rokcha! The water is stopped!" The words spread from doorway to doorway, a quiet alarm that mobilized the village instantly. There was no panic, only a focused and immediate understanding of the danger. The mountain had presented its first challenge of the day. Within minutes, a team of 12 men and women gathered at the site of the collapse. They carried not modern machinery, but the tools of their ancestors: long, sturdy wooden poles, woven baskets, and heavy iron hoes. Their movements were efficient and coordinated, a testament to generations of shared knowledge. They understood the physics of water and earth. They knew that a direct assault on the center of the blockage would be foolish, risking a sudden catastrophic release of the pooled water. Their approach had to be careful, deliberate, and respectful of the mountain's power. The leader, an older man with steady hands and clear eyes, pointed with his chin towards the side of the collapse. The plan was not to destroy the dam, but to guide the water around it. They would carve a new, smaller channel, a spillway to relieve the pressure safely. The men began to work on the edge of the landslide, using their poles as levers to pry away larger rocks. The women, with their baskets, started scooping away the looser soil and smaller stones, passing them down a human chain to be dumped safely away from the streambed. The sounds of their work blended with the wind. The scrape of metal against rock, the thud of stones being tossed aside, and the grunts of effort were the only language needed. Each person knew their role. Some dug while others cleared, their bodies moving in a synchronized rhythm. They could feel the dampness of the earth and see the water level behind the blockage slowly rising. It was a race against the weight of the water itself. The tension was palpable, a physical force as real as the wind pushing against their backs. Slowly, a shallow trench began to form. At first, only a small trickle of muddy water seeped through. Then, as the channel deepened, the trickle became a steady flow. They worked faster, widening and reinforcing the new path. The water, eager to be free, helped them, carving the channel deeper with its own energy. Soon, a controlled stream was flowing again, bypassing the main blockage. The immediate danger of a flash flood was averted. The water, though still muddy, was moving, and the silence had been replaced by the comforting sound of a running stream. While the water team worked, another crisis was quietly unfolding. An elderly woman, her face lined with the wisdom of many harvests, unbolted the heavy wooden door of the community storage hut. This small, windowless stone building was the village's treasure chest, holding the precious grains and, most importantly, the sacred honey from previous hunts. As the door creaked open, a foul, musty smell hit her. An odor of decay and animal waste that should not be there. Her heart sank. The wind was a threat from the outside, but this felt like a betrayal from within. She lit a small butter lamp, its flame dancing wildly in the drafts. The flickering light revealed a scene of devastation. Woven bamboo baskets, once filled to the brim with barley and dried corn, had been chewed through. Piles of grain were spilled across the floor, mixed with the tiny, dark droppings of rats. The pests, driven by the cold winds, had found a way into their sanctuary. They had not only eaten the food, but had also contaminated it, rendering much of it useless for the families who depended on it for the lean months ahead. Her eyes scanned the shelves where the honey was stored. Clay pots, sealed with wax and cloth, held the golden liquid. Her relief at seeing the pots intact was short-lived. She noticed gnaw marks on the wooden shelves and dark stains where honey had dripped. One of the pots had been knocked over, its contents spilling and attracting more vermin. Worse, the rats had chewed through the cloth seals on several other pots, exposing the honey to the air and dirt. The sacred product of the cliffs, a source of income and traditional medicine, was compromised. The woman stepped back out into the wind, her face grim. She secured the heavy door and made her way to the village center. Her message was delivered with the same quiet urgency as the news about the stream. A few words to her daughter, a gesture to a neighbor. The news rippled through the people not working on the stream. The granary, the heart of their winter survival, had been breached. The second challenge of the morning had been revealed, and it struck at the very core of their food security. The village's resilience was being tested on another front. So, a new team was assembled, mostly made up of the village women and older men. They showed up at the storage hut, carrying brooms made from stiff grasses, woven mats, and buckets. Their first task, well, it was methodical and honestly, pretty grim. Every single bag and basket of grain had to be removed from the hut and inspected. They all worked together, forming a line to pass the heavy containers out into the windy clearing. The good grain was carefully separated and poured onto clean mats, while, the contaminated piles were swept up to be burned. A necessary but painful loss. The air was just filled with the dust of grain and, honestly, the disheartening sight of their hard-earned food being discarded. Each scoop of spoiled barley felt like a blow, but seriously, there was no time for despair. Their actions were focused and practical. As some sorted the grain, others got started on the tough job of cleaning the hut itself. They scrubbed the stone floors with stiff brushes and a mix of water and ash, which is a traditional cleaning agent that would also help keep pests away. Every corner, every crack, was meticulously cleaned to get rid of the scent of the rats. Then, attention turned to sealing the breach. An old man, who was a skilled mason, inspected the stone walls, foot by foot. He ran his calloused hands over the joints, feeling for loose stones or gaps in the mortar. That's when he found the entry point, a small, hidden hole near the foundation where the mortar had crumbled away. Using a mixture of clay, dung, and fine gravel, he expertly sealed the hole, packing it tight until the wall was solid again. Other men checked the wooden door, reinforcing its frame and making sure it fit snugly, leaving no gap for even the smallest intruder. And finally, they turned to the precious honey. Each pot was carefully cleaned. The ones that had been opened were checked, and the contaminated top layer was scraped away. The remaining honey was consolidated into a clean, secure pot. New cloth covers were cut, and fresh beeswax was melted to seal them shut, making them airtight and safe once more. Any spilled honey was cleaned from the shelves, and, the whole storage system was reorganized. The work was exhausting, but as the last clean basket was returned to the spotless hut, a sense of order was restored. The guardians of the grain had secured their future. Just as a sense of control began to settle over the village, the wind shifted. It had been a powerful, steady force, but now it came in violent, unpredictable gusts. The low moan escalated into a high-pitched shriek as it funneled through the narrow mountain passes. The sky grew darker, the grey clouds churning with a new intensity. The villagers, their hands raw from moving rocks and sorting grain, looked up with concern. This was a different kind of wind, a destructive force that threatened the very roofs over their heads and the paths they walked. The most vulnerable structures were the bamboo roofs on the animal sheds and the suspension walkway that led to the honey cliffs. The wind slammed into the woven bamboo panels, lifting them and threatening to tear them from their moorings. The sound was terrifying. A series of loud cracks and groans as the bamboo flexed under the immense pressure. If the roofs were lost, the livestock would be exposed to the elements, a devastating blow just before the harshest part of the season. The villagers watched as the lashings that held the panels in place began to strain. The focus of their fear, however, was the honey path. This was not a path in the traditional sense, but a series of rickety bamboo ladders and a narrow suspension walkway pinned to the sheer cliff face. It was their route to the giant hives of the Himalayan honeybees. The wind was now hitting the cliff broadside, turning the walkway into a wildly swinging pendulum. The creak of the bamboo footings and the twang of the straining ropes were audible even over the gale. A single broken rope or a dislodged anchor could send the entire structure plunging into the abyss below. The honey hunt was everything. It was their culture, their income, and a rite of passage. The path was its gateway. Seeing it being battered by the wind sent a fresh wave of alarm through the community. The two earlier crises had been about resources, water, and food. This was about their identity and their most sacred economic activity. The men who had just finished redirecting the stream looked towards the cliffs, their faces set with grim determination. The mountain was not finished with them yet. It was now threatening the path to its most dangerous and valuable gift. A small, elite team of honey hunters, men who knew the cliffs as well as they knew their own homes, gathered at the base of the trail. They carried coils of thick rope made from twisted bamboo fibers and heavy wooden mallets. They did not speak. They simply looked at each other, their eyes communicating the shared risk and the absolute necessity of the task ahead. The leader, the same man who had orchestrated the stream diversion, gave a single nod. It was time to secure the path. They began the perilous ascent, moving with a fluid, practiced grace. The first part of the journey involved climbing a series of bamboo ladders lashed to the rock. Here, the wind tried to peel them from the cliff face. They pressed their bodies flat against the cold, damp stone, moving only in the brief lulls between the most violent gusts. The bamboo rungs were slick with mist, and each handhold and foothold was a deliberate, calculated act of trust in the material and in their own strength. The sound of their breathing was loud in their ears, a stark contrast to the roaring chaos of the wind around them. They reached the suspension walkway. It was a terrifying sight, swinging back and forth in a wide, sickening arc. The woven bamboo floorboards were rattling, and the ropes groaned under the incredible strain. Without hesitation, the men began their work. Two of them, acting as anchors, braced themselves against the rock, their feet wedged into crevices. They fed out a new safety rope, which the lead climber clipped to his harness. He then began to inch his way out onto the swaying bridge, his body low, almost crawling to reduce the wind's purchase on him. He moved from one anchor point to the next, his hands checking the tension of every existing rope. He used his mallet to hammer the wooden anchor pegs deeper into the cracks in the rock, securing the foundation of the bridge. Another hunter followed, carrying a new guide rope. They worked to attach this new rope to the far side, creating an additional line of stability. Their movements were a dance of survival, a conversation with the wind and the rock, using their deep knowledge to counteract the raw power of nature. Each tightened knot and secured peg was a small victory against the sky's fury. As the hunters worked on the exposed walkway, another team focused on the village itself. They scrambled onto the roofs of the livestock sheds, their bodies silhouetted against the churning grey sky. The wind threatened to tear them from their perches, but they moved with the agility of mountain goats. They carried heavy stones, which they strategically placed along the edges of the bamboo roof panels. The weight was just enough to stop the panels from lifting, preventing the wind from getting underneath and ripping them off entirely. Their work was a symphony of silent cooperation. One person would haul a stone up a ladder, and another would be there to receive it and guide it into place. There were no wasted movements. They could feel the structure of the roof groaning beneath them, and they worked to reinforce the weak points. They used strips of fresh bamboo fiber to add new lashings, weaving them around the main support beams and the panels, tightening the entire structure until it became one solid unit, better able to withstand the onslaught. The creaking and cracking sounds began to lessen. Meanwhile, the team on the honey path was making progress. After securing the main suspension walkway with additional ropes, they turned their attention to the stone steps and smaller ledges that made up the rest of the trail. The wind and rain had loosened rocks and washed away soil, making the footing treacherous. They moved along the path, testing each stone before putting their weight on it. They cleared away loose debris, kicking it over the edge into the misty depths below. They repositioned unsteady stones, packing smaller rocks and earth around them to create a stable footing. This was not construction. It was maintenance born of deep familiarity. They knew every loose stone, every crumbling edge. The work was painstaking and dangerous. A single misstep could be fatal. But their focus was absolute. They were not just repairing a path. They were reaffirming their connection to the cliffs, ensuring the way was safe for the young men who would soon descend on ropes to face the giant beams. They were weavers of safety, their ropes and their hands creating a line of trust between the village and the perilous hives. As the afternoon sun began its descent, the wind finally began to lose its fury. The violent gusts softened into a steady breeze, and the shriek quieted to a low hum. A break in the clouds appeared, and a single golden ray of light cut through the gloom, illuminating the village. A collective sigh of relief seemed to pass through the community. The challenges had been met. The stream flowed once more, its water clearing as the silt settled. The granary was clean and secure, its precious contents safe. The roofs were intact, and the honey path was stable, ready for the hunters. The villagers gathered in the central clearing, not in a formal meeting, but in the casual way of people who have shared a struggle. The teams who had worked on the water, the grain, and the path merged back into one community. Faces were smudged with dirt and etched with fatigue, but their eyes held a look of quiet satisfaction. They had faced the mountain's test and had won, not through force, but through cooperation, knowledge, and respect for the power they lived alongside. They shared cups of hot, sweet tea, the warmth, the welcome comfort after the day's chill. There was little talk of the morning's emergencies. The work was done, and that was all that mattered. Instead, the conversation turned to the honey hunt. The men who had secured the path spoke in low tones about the state of the ropes and the feel of the rock. The elders nodded, their minds already on the rituals and preparations for the descent. The wind had been a trial, but it had also cleared the air. The conditions for the hunt were now close to perfect. The danger of the morning had sharpened their focus and strengthened their resolve. As dusk settled, a sense of peace returned to the Cliffside village. The sounds were familiar again, the gentle murmur of the restored stream, the soft lowing of livestock in their secure sheds, and the murmur of conversation drifting from the stone houses. The day had been a race against nature, a tense and desperate struggle on three fronts. But the Gurung people had demonstrated their resilience. They had worked as one, their ancient skills and deep sense of community their greatest tools. The emergencies were over. Now, there was only the calm, focused anticipation of the great honey hunt to come.